The small diner on the corner of Maple Street was struggling. Fewer customers, high staff turnover, and an owner who rarely visited made it hard for employees to stay motivated. But among them was Mia, a dedicated cashier who treated every customer with kindness, no matter how tough the day got. One rainy evening, a man in worn-out clothes and an old baseball cap entered the diner. He looked around, observing the staff and the customers. His clothes were slightly wrinkled, and his shoes were muddy, making it seem like he had been walking for hours. The manager, Todd, took one look at him and scoffed. "Great! Another one wasting our time," he muttered under his breath. The other employees barely acknowledged the man's presence, too focused on their shifts. But Mia? She smiled warmly. "Welcome in. Can I get you something hot to drink?" The man hesitated, checking his pockets. I only have a few bucks. Just a coffee, if that's okay." Mia nodded. "It's on me. You look like you could use something warm." The man's tired eyes lit up with gratitude. He took a seat in the corner, quietly observing everything. He watched as Todd barked orders at the kitchen staff, as some waiters ignored customers, and how most of the employees seemed disengaged. Mia, however, remained different. She helped an elderly woman carry her tray, comforted a crying child, and still made sure the mysterious customer had everything he needed. What Mia didn't know: this man wasn't just another customer. He was the owner of the diner, Undercover. And her kindness was about to change her life forever. The Undercover boss, James Whitaker, watched everything carefully from his seat. He had built this diner years ago with a dream to create a place where people felt welcome. But tonight, what he saw was far from his vision. Todd, the manager, treated employees like they were disposable. He snapped at a waiter for being too slow, rolled his eyes when an elderly customer asked for help, and even ignored a customer complaint. The rest of the staff followed his lead, working with little care, as if they were just waiting for their shifts to end. But Mia? She was different. James noticed how she treated every customer with warmth. When an older man struggled to count his change, she patiently helped him instead of rushing him along. When a waiter spilled a drink, she grabbed napkins and helped clean up without hesitation. Then, James saw something that made his stomach turn. A homeless man walked in, looking for food. Todd immediately stormed over. "We don't serve freeloaders here. Get out!" The man, embarrassed, turned to leave. Mia's face hardened. She grabbed a small bag from behind the counter and ran outside. "Wait," she called after the man, handing him a sandwich and a bottle of water. "Here. Take this." James took a deep breath. He had seen enough. This wasn't just bad management, this was a broken culture, and one person, Mia, was holding it all together. James decided at that moment things were going to change, but first, he needed to see just how deep this problem ran. James knew he had to push things further to understand the true nature of his employees. If he was going to make the right decisions, he needed to see how they treated not just customers, but their own coworkers. The dinner rush was in full swing, and James intentionally fumbled with the cash register, pretending to struggle. He wanted to see who would step up. Todd noticed immediately. Instead of helping, he scoffed. "New guy can't even work a register? We don't have time for incompetence." A few employees laughed, but Mia's reaction was different. She walked over, whispering, "Here, let me show you. It can be tricky at first." She quickly explained the system, her voice patient and kind. James smiled inwardly. She didn't know who he was, yet she helped anyway. The night continued, and James took on different tasks, cleaning tables, refilling drinks, even running food to customers. He watched closely. The pattern was clear. Todd bullied, others ignored, and Mia cared. Then came the real test. A customer at table 6 intentionally shorted the bill by $20. Todd saw the receipt, smirked, and slid it into the register without a word. James turned to Mia. "Shouldn't we say something?" She frowned. "Yeah, but Todd doesn't care. He'd rather avoid confrontation." She sighed. "But it's not fair. Someone has to cover that money." Mia walked over to the table, politely addressing the customer. She handled the situation so gracefully that the man ended up apologizing and paying the full amount. James nodded. She wasn't just kind, she had integrity, and that was exactly what this diner needed. James continued observing, and the pattern became clearer. Mia was the backbone of this diner. She went above and beyond, not just for customers but for her coworkers as well. One evening, as the shift neared its end, a heavy storm rolled in. Rain pounded against the windows, and thunder echoed in the distance. The diner wasn't as packed, but the tension in the air was thick. Todd was in a particularly bad mood. A customer had complained about his attitude, and instead of apologizing, he lashed out at the staff. "Why do I even bother? This place is a dump, and half the people here don't even deserve their jobs," he muttered loudly. James clenched his fists but remained quiet. He wanted to see how Mia would react. She didn't hesitate. "Todd, if you don't like working here, maybe you shouldn't." Todd scoffed. "Oh, please. Like you'd survive without me." Mia shook her head. "We'd be fine. It's not about surviving, it's about making this place better. And that means treating people right." Todd rolled his eyes and stormed off to the back. James was impressed. Mia didn't just do her job, she protected the diner's integrity. Just as things seemed to calm down, the storm knocked out the power. The diner was plunged into darkness, and a few customers gasped. Without missing a beat, Mia grabbed a flashlight from behind the counter. "It's okay, everyone. Just give us a minute." She reassured the nervous guests while quickly moving to check on the kitchen staff. James watched in amazement. Even in chaos, Mia stayed in control. She had no idea her kindness and leadership were about to change her life forever. The diner remained dark except for the dim glow of Mia's flashlight. The customers murmured among themselves, unsure of what to do. Some grabbed their phones to use as lights, while others debated leaving. James watched closely, curious about how the staff would handle the situation. Most of them looked panicked, but Mia took charge immediately. "All right, everyone, let's stay calm," she said with confidence. "The backup generator should kick in soon, but until then, we'll keep things running as best we can." She turned to the kitchen staff. "Check the food on the stoves, make sure nothing burns. If anything needs to be saved, do it now." Then she faced the customers. "If you're waiting on food, don't worry. If it's safe to serve, we'll get it to you." James noticed something remarkable. While the manager, Mr. Peterson, was nowhere to be found, Mia was keeping everything under control. Todd, however, was leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. "Why bother? It's not our problem if the power's out." Mia shot him a sharp glance. "It is our problem, Todd. These people came here expecting good service. Power or no power, we do our best." James smirked. She had the heart of a true leader. A few minutes later, the generator finally kicked in, and the lights flickered back on. A soft cheer came from the customers, relieved that the crisis was over. Mia wiped her forehead and sighed in relief. Then, without skipping a beat, she went back to serving tables, making sure everyone was comfortable and happy. James leaned back in his chair, more certain than ever. Mia wasn't just a good employee, she was exactly the kind of person he needed in his company. She just didn't know it yet. As the lights flickered back on, the tension in the diner eased. Customers resumed their conversations, and the kitchen staff rushed to get orders back on track. But James wasn't watching them. His focus was on Mia and how she handled everything. She had kept the place running when everyone else froze. She had stepped up, while others, including her manager, had disappeared. And speaking of Mr. Peterson, he finally emerged. The stocky, balding man walked out from the back office, adjusting his tie like he had just finished something important. His eyes swept over the restaurant as if he were inspecting a battlefield after the fight had already ended. "What a disaster," he muttered. Mia turned, surprised to see him. "Oh, Mr. Peterson, we got through it. The generator kicked in, and everything's back to normal." Peterson barely acknowledged her. Instead, he walked past her and headed straight for Todd. "Good job keeping things together," he said, clapping Todd on the back. Mia's mouth fell open. James saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes, but she swallowed it down. Actually, she said carefully, Todd didn't really. Peterson cut her off with a dismissive wave. Whatever. Just clean up the mess. Then, with a sigh, he muttered, we can't afford another night like this. You all need to be better prepared. Mia nodded, though James could tell she wanted to say more. Instead, she just got back to work, wiping down tables and checking on customers. James clenched his jaw. He had seen enough. This wasn't just a test anymore. He needed to do something, but first, he had to see just how deep the problem ran. James sat back, watching as the restaurant returned to normal. The customers were settled, the orders were coming out again, and the storm outside had calmed. But inside, something still wasn't right. Mia was doing all the work. She was the one checking on customers, refilling drinks, making sure everyone was okay after the blackout. Todd, meanwhile, leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone, while Mr. Peterson stood by the kitchen, arms crossed, doing nothing. James had seen enough. He stood up and walked toward the counter. Excuse me, he said. Can I speak to the manager? Peterson looked up, annoyed. Yeah? What do you need? James gestured toward Mia. I just wanted to say that she was incredible tonight. She kept things running while everyone else froze. She deserves some serious recognition. Mia's face turned red, but before she could say anything, Peterson let out a dry chuckle. That's her job, he said dismissively. She's a cashier. If she wants recognition, maybe she should focus on moving up. James' expression didn't change, but inside, he was boiling. And how exactly would she do that, he asked. Peterson shrugged. People who deserve promotions don't wait for them. They take them. Mia kept her head down, pretending not to hear. But James saw the exhaustion in her shoulders. She had been taking responsibility all night, and still, it wasn't enough. He turned back to Peterson, his jaw tightening. Well, James said calmly, I think that's about to change. Peterson frowned. What does that mean? James just smiled. Guess we'll find out soon. Something big was coming, and nobody was ready for it. Mia had no idea what James meant, but something about his confidence sent a chill through her. She had spent years in this job, always doing more than required, hoping someone would finally see her efforts. But every time, she was overlooked, and now, this stranger, this quiet, polite man, was acting like he knew something she didn't. Todd, still glued to his phone, scoffed. Look, buddy, if you're done giving speeches, we've got work to do. James smirked but didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Mia. Can you tell me more about your job? How long have you been here? Mia hesitated. Peterson hated when employees spoke too much to customers, but something told her this was different. Almost 5 years, she said. I started as a hostess, then moved up to cashier. I've trained new employees, covered shifts, and even handled inventory when the manager was out. James raised an eyebrow. So you've done more than just your job description. Mia gave a tired laugh. Yeah, but promotions don't come easy. I've asked, but Mr. Peterson always says I need more experience. Peterson, who had been listening, suddenly stepped forward. Because you do, he snapped. You're good at what you do, Mia, but you're not ready for management. James turned to face him, his eyes sharp. And what exactly makes her not ready? Peterson's face turned red. That's none of your business. James exhaled and leaned forward slightly. Actually, he said, it is. A tense silence filled the room. Mia's heart pounded. What was going on? Then, James reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, black business card. He held it up for everyone to see. My name is James Holloway, he said. I own this restaurant. The entire room froze. Mia gasped. Todd dropped his phone. And Peterson? His face drained of color. The truth was out, and now, everything was about to change. A heavy silence filled the restaurant. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of James Holloway's words hung in the air like a thundercloud about to burst. Mia's breath caught in her throat. He owns the restaurant, Todd's jaw dropped. His usual smug arrogance vanished in an instant. He looked at James as if seeing him for the first time, but the most shocking reaction came from Peterson. His face turned a deep shade of red, and for the first time ever, he looked nervous. You own this place? Peterson stammered. That's impossible. James let out a small chuckle. Is it? He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then turned it around for everyone to see. It was the official corporate website. And right there, under the CEO and Founders section, was his picture. Mia's stomach did a full flip. She had been talking to the owner this entire time. The other employees started whispering among themselves. Some of them looked shocked, others terrified. Peterson swallowed hard. Mr. Holloway, I had no idea it was you. His voice had completely changed. Gone was the harsh, dismissive tone. Now, he sounded desperate. James slipped his phone back into his pocket. His easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by a commanding presence. I know you didn't, he said. And that's the problem. Mia felt her hands shake. Was this really happening? James turned to her. Mia, do you know why I went undercover? She shook her head, unable to speak. James's gaze shifted around the room. I wanted to see how my employees were treated. I wanted to know if this restaurant was living up to the values I built it on. His voice hardened. And what I saw was disgraceful. His eyes locked onto Peterson. I watched you ignore customers. I watched you belittle employees. And worst of all, I watched you disrespect the only person in this room who actually cares about this business. Mia's eyes widened. Was he talking about her? Peterson's lip twitched. Sir, save it, James cut him off. I'm not interested in excuses. The room went silent again. Everyone knew what was coming next. James took a slow step forward. You're fired. The words ripped through the restaurant like an explosion. Mia's heart pounded. She had dreamed of this moment, but never thought she'd actually see it happen. Peterson's face twisted in rage. You can't fire me. I've been running this place for years. James didn't even blink. And now, you won't be running it for a second longer. Security stepped forward. Peterson looked around, realizing he had no choice. With a furious glare, he turned and stormed out. Mia stared, unable to believe her eyes. Peterson was gone, and now, everything was about to change. As the doors slammed shut behind Peterson, a strange mix of relief and anticipation filled the room. The staff exchanged wide-eyed glances, still struggling to process what had just happened. The once dominant manager had been stripped of his power in mere seconds. Mia still couldn't move. Had this really happened? Was Peterson really gone? James Holloway exhaled, then turned to face the stunned employees. His piercing gaze swept over each of them before settling on Mia. You, he said, his voice softer now. Mia straightened. Yes, sir? James smiled. You're the reason I still have faith in this place. A murmur ran through the room. Some employees looked at Mia with admiration. Others, the ones who had blindly followed Peterson's lead, looked ashamed. I came here undercover because I wanted to understand what was happening behind the scenes, James continued. And what I found was a business on the verge of collapse, not because of poor profits, but because of poor leadership. He let the words sink in before continuing. I saw employees like Todd, he said, glancing at the assistant manager. Todd shrank back, knowing he was next. Employees who cared more about power than people. And then I saw Mia. Mia's breath hitched. You helped customers when no one else did. You stayed professional, even when your own manager treated you like you were nothing. And despite the toxic work environment, you never let it change you. James stepped closer. That's the kind of leadership I need in this restaurant. Mia's stomach flipped. Wait, what? The employees gasped. Todd's eyes widened in horror. Wait, are you saying? James smiled. Mia, I want you to step up as the new manager of this restaurant. The world stopped. Mia blinked, her heart hammering in her chest. Did he just say, manager? A few employees clapped. Some looked relieved. Others, like Todd, looked as if the ground had been pulled out from under them. Mia opened her mouth, but no words came out. This had to be a dream. I don't know what to say, she finally whispered. Say yes, James encouraged. Say you're ready to lead this team the right way. Mia hesitated. This was her chance, her moment. She could finally make a difference. But was she really ready? She took a deep breath. Yes. A wave of applause filled the restaurant. The employees who had once ignored her now cheered for her. Todd's face burned red. He muttered something under his breath and stormed toward the exit. Mia didn't care. He was Peterson's right hand. If he wanted to leave, he could. James clapped a hand on her shoulder. Good. Let's build something better. Mia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. This was just the beginning. Mia sat in the manager's office, her office. It still felt unreal. The room, once Peterson's domain, no longer reeked of fear and intimidation. Instead, it held a quiet sense of change, of possibility. James Holloway sat across from her, a proud smile on his face. So, Mia, he said, leaning forward. How does it feel? She exhaled, still trying to process everything. Overwhelming, she admitted. But, exciting. James nodded. That's natural. You're stepping into leadership, but you already have what it takes. Now, we need to fix what's broken. Mia knew exactly where to start. The employees, she said firmly. Most of them are good people, but they've been scared for too long. They need to know this place is changing for the better. James grinned. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Together, they walked back into the dining area. The employees, some still hesitant, some relieved, gathered around. Mia took a deep breath. It was her moment to lead. I know things have been tough, she began. And I know many of you felt powerless under Peterson's management. But that changes today. A few employees exchanged glances. Todd, still standing near the back, scoffed. And what makes you think you can change anything? Mia met his gaze without fear. Because we're not running this place on fear anymore, she said. We're running it on respect. On teamwork. And if you don't want to be a part of that, you're free to leave. Silence. Then, to her surprise, one of the cooks, an older man named Luis, stepped forward. I'm staying, he said, nodding firmly. I've worked here for 10 years. I've seen how bad things got. If Mia says things will change, I believe her. A few others nodded. The shift supervisor, Lena, smiled. I'm in too. Mia felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with pride. Todd, now visibly irritated, scoffed. Fine. But don't think this will be easy. Mia didn't flinch. I never thought it would be. James clapped his hands together. Well, it looks like we have a team willing to move forward. And to make things official, Mia, as your first act as manager, what's your first decision? Mia didn't even hesitate. The employees who stayed silent out of fear? They deserve to be heard now. She turned to the group. Starting tomorrow, we'll hold an open meeting. Every concern, every suggestion, you'll have a voice. A ripple of hope and excitement spread through the team. James beamed. Now that's leadership. Mia smiled. For the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. The next morning, Mia arrived at the restaurant before sunrise. This time, not as a cashier, but as the new manager. It still felt surreal, but she knew one thing, she was ready. As the employees trickled in, they found something unexpected. A handwritten note on the front counter. To the team that makes this place run, today marks a fresh start. Your voices matter. Your work matters. Let's build something better, together. Mia, one by one, they read it, their expressions shifting from skepticism to something new. Hope. At exactly 8 a.m., Mia stood at the center of the dining area, surrounded by the employees, no longer scared, no longer just surviving. This was their restaurant now. James Holloway sat in the back, watching silently, his usual sharp demeanor softened with pride. Mia took a deep breath. "First things first," she said, addressing the room. "I want to hear from you. What needs to change?" For a moment, silence. Then, Luis, the cook, spoke first. "The kitchen's a mess. We need better equipment." Mia nodded. "Done." Lena, the shift supervisor, raised a hand. "Schedules need to be fairer. Some people barely get enough hours, others are overworked." Mia jotted it down. "We'll fix that." Then, unexpectedly, Todd spoke up. The same Todd who had doubted her from the start. "We need better training," he muttered. "Peterson never cared if we succeeded. We had to figure things out on our own." Mia met his gaze and, for the first time, saw something different, not defiance, but a willingness to try. "I agree," she said. "We'll set up proper training sessions." A murmur spread through the room, not of fear, but of possibility. James finally stood up. "I've seen a lot of managers come and go," he said. "Some were great, some weren't. But Mia? She's different. She's not just leading, she's listening." Mia smiled, feeling the weight of his words. She had come full circle. As the meeting wrapped up, the employees didn't rush back to their stations like they used to. They stayed, they talked, they felt like a team. Mia turned to James. "Think we'll make it work?" James chuckled. "I think you already have." And as Mia looked around, at the restaurant, at the people who were now more than just co-workers, she realized something. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a chance to build something real. A new beginning, and she wouldn't waste it. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories like this. What would you have done in Mia's situation? Let us know in the comments below, and remember, kindness and hard work never go unnoticed. Stay tuned for more life-changing stories.